In a quiet corner of the restaurant, Nick and Phyllis sat together, surrounded by an air of silence and barely concealed disappointment. They were both worried about Summer, who had decided to stay in Milan, far from the embrace of her family. Nick couldn't suppress the thought that he should personally go there to meet the man Summer was dating, just to get a clearer understanding of the situation and feel more at ease. However, Phyllis quickly reminded him that Summer was no longer a little girl. She was a grown woman, fully capable of making her own life decisions. Despite her advice, Nick remained set on visiting Summer since he would be near the area anyway. Curious about Nick's reasons for another trip to Europe, Phyllis asked. Nick didn't hesitate to tell her about the invitation from Dumas, a name that had recently been making waves. Phyllis was stunned. She had gone all the way to Washington, D.C., trying to meet Dumas but had failed. She couldn't understand how Nick had received such an easy invitation. Nick went on to share about other invitations he'd received, which only fueled Phyllis's frustration, as she believed her name should have been on the guest list. Without sugarcoating it, Nick reminded her that Dumas had no interest in meeting her, let alone investing in her new project. Still, Phyllis had no intention of giving up. She revealed she was working on a new, more realistic plan after realizing her previous approach was too far-fetched. She hoped to convince Dumas with her strong business acumen and secure a role within his organization. Nick, clearly concerned, asked which company she was targeting. Phyllis kept the details to herself, only revealing that it was one of Dumas's companies where she believed she could truly shine. Nick remained skeptical that doing business with someone as mysterious as Dumas was a wise idea. Phyllis fired back, accusing him of hypocrisy since he had accepted an invitation from the same man. Nick explained that he was merely trying to protect his family's interests, especially Chancellor. Phyllis found the idea that Dumas was targeting Chancellor ridiculous, as it was a private company and not easy to take over. Nick didn't deny that, but he feared Dumas could still do damage in the process. Phyllis argued that if Amanda had agreed to work with Dumas, then he couldn't be all that bad. Still, Nick stood firm and advised Phyllis to stay away from Dumas. Half-jokingly, Phyllis then suggested Nick let her hitch a ride on his jet to France. Just then, Nick received an urgent call and had to leave. The moment he walked away, Phyllis grabbed her phone and texted Amanda about an important party. Elsewhere, Jack and Diane were preparing for their honeymoon. Jack couldn't hide his desire to leave everything behind and begin their journey right away. But Diane reminded him that they couldn't just abandon everything. Under Jack's insistence, Diane agreed to change their plans, skipping Greece and heading to France instead. She sensed that Jack was using this trip as a way to accept Dumas's invitation, and she couldn't deny her growing curiosity about the man. However, Diane also expressed frustration that a stranger like Dumas was starting to dominate so much of their personal life. They decided to travel to Nice on Friday the 13th, a strangely ominous date that made Diane even more suspicious, especially after learning Billy had received a similar invitation. She had even secretly canceled their original Greece trip in advance. Meanwhile, Claire informed Kyle that her father, Cole, had woken up feeling unwell that morning, leaving her deeply worried. Kyle reassured her, saying that sometimes viruses could relapse without warning and that Cole just needed rest, cold medicine, and a calm mind. Claire wanted to take her father to see a doctor, but he refused. Kyle encouraged her to rest, but she said she couldn't leave work until her shift ended. Before leaving, Kyle thanked Claire for organizing such a memorable party. Jack and Diane entered just as Claire was preparing to leave. Diane complimented her on the event, but Claire hurried off without much of a word. Kyle then revealed that Cole wasn't feeling well, and it was clearly affecting Claire. Jack and Diane worried that Kyle might have been infected, but he assured them he was fine and just hoped Victor would accept the offer he had made. When asked about the details, Kyle said it was personal and not to worry. Even so, Jack and Diane reminded him that Victor wasn't someone to be taken lightly. In another development, Billy told Adam that he was waiting to see if any negative information would surface, but so far, all was quiet. Adam warned that this might just be the calm before the storm and that they could be waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Billy wasn't concerned, believing there was nothing left to dig up. Adam smiled knowingly, suggesting Billy didn't know everything yet. Billy claimed he was ready to face whatever smear campaign might come. Adam warned that the next fall could be his last. At that moment, Sally walked in, curious about what was going on. Chelsea suggested the group grab coffee to lighten the mood. Sally and Billy left for their table. Chelsea used the moment to ask Adam if he truly meant to warn Billy. Adam confirmed there was always unresolved tension between them. Chelsea advised him that he could hate Billy, but he needed to keep his promises. Adam assured her that nothing had changed in his plans. He mentioned Dumas's invitation and said it was a great opportunity to create a scandal that could distract Victor. Chelsea was curious for details, but Adam admitted they hadn't actually been invited, which only made him more irritated. Chelsea reminded him that Chancellor wasn't their enemy. Adam wouldn't accept being overlooked and swore he would ignite his plan by any means necessary. Billy, on the other hand, told Sally about the Dumas invitation. She was puzzled that all the powerful families and executives in Genoa City had received the same invite. Billy suspected Dumas had a grand plan targeting them all, and he couldn't stay out of it. Sally realized Billy seemed ready to attend the event. When she asked why, Billy said it was a chance to confront and possibly take down Victor. Sally worried that Billy's obsession with revenge could derail their newly launched company. She was adamant about not letting him ruin everything out of spite. Billy insisted he had to find out what was truly happening and was certain that Jack and Diane weren't invited by coincidence. Sally suggested he leave it to Jack, but Billy already had a plan. He proposed delaying their launch by a month to focus on the trip to Nice and invited Sally to join him. She disagreed, even as Billy pleaded for her trust. The story continued to thicken with suspicion, overlapping schemes, risky plans, and underlying tensions in relationships across Genoa City. A place where no one could tell friend from foe, and no one knew what truly awaited behind the doors of Dumas's party. The conversation between Adam and Chelsea ended in a tense silence. With cold eyes and a dry tone, Adam confirmed he would continue with his plan even without an official invitation. Chelsea couldn't hide her disappointment. She had hoped Adam would stay away from power games, but clearly his grudge against Victor still haunted him. The promise of a new beginning and a life with fewer schemes now seemed like a thin veneer. Without another word, Chelsea left the table, leaving Adam alone with a distant gaze and a faint, knowing smile. On the other side, things weren't going much better between Sally and Billy. Both were clinging to their own views. Billy refused to give up his trip to Nice, determined to track Dumas's every move, even if it damaged his budding relationship with Sally. She, in contrast, didn't want to see everything fall apart because of his endless feud with Victor. After arguing themselves into silence, they left the cafe without another word. Unexpectedly, Sally and Chelsea crossed paths outside. Without the men by their side, the two women decided to sit down together, though the initial awkwardness was obvious. It was the burden of having no one else to confide in that prompted Sally to break the silence. She spoke about Billy, how he was still entangled in his old vendetta against Victor and seemed willing to sacrifice everything to expose him, including his career and personal relationships. Chelsea was stunned. She hadn't realized Billy's hatred still burned so fiercely. In her memory, he had been trying to rebuild his life after bitter failures. She didn't expect that the pain inside him had never truly healed. Sally's story left Chelsea conflicted. She began to question Adam, the very man she'd been trying to steer away from power games. In a world as volatile as Genoa City, where every move was calculated and every person hid their agenda, was it even possible to stay out of the game? Perhaps Adam needed someone like her to guide him, not stop him. Or maybe Billy, the one now going too far with his hatred, was the one who truly needed saving. Chelsea was torn. She couldn't make a decision right away, but one thing was clear. Both Adam and Billy were heading into dangerous waters, and somehow, she would have to choose whom to stand beside. What she didn't realize was that the time to choose might come sooner than she thought. Meanwhile, Phyllis continued her efforts to get into Dumas's party. After being refused help by Nick, she turned to Amanda, hoping their long friendship and mutual respect would open a door. But Amanda, always principled and ethical, was not easily swayed. She politely but firmly refused, saying Phyllis's presence at the party could cause disruption and damage Amanda's image in Dumas's eyes, someone she didn't fully trust yet. Phyllis left the meeting frustrated and increasingly bitter. Undeterred, she shifted her focus to Sharon, someone she had clashed with before, but also a woman known for her intelligence, empathy, and ability to listen. Swallowing her pride, Phyllis approached Sharon with a forced smile and a reason more honest than usual. She spoke about wanting to be where the big decisions were made, about needing a chance to prove herself after so many failures and wounds. She tried to appeal to Sharon's empathy, though deep down she knew it might be futile. Sharon said nothing at first. She looked at Phyllis as if trying to decipher whether her words were sincere or merely a cover for another grand scheme. Finally, Sharon said she would consider it, but made no promises. Phyllis walked away, unsure if she had made any progress or was still stuck in the same place. Meanwhile, at Newman Enterprises, Victor began hearing rumors about Dumas's invitations sent to many key players in the city, including former allies and enemies alike. He had yet to publicly respond, but he already felt a sense of unease. Dumas was gathering his chess pieces, and Victor knew all too well that when rivals are invited to the same table, it's no longer just a social gathering. It's a strategic board, where every word, glance, and handshake carries hidden meaning. Amidst this atmosphere, both Adam and Billy, two men Victor had once pushed to the brink, were plotting their own paths.
Sally, Chelsea, Phyllis, Omondo,
and Sharon, 5 women on different sides, were also being pulled into the storm. Each had a choice to make, a goal to chase, and an unhealed wound to protect. The Dumas party in Nice was no longer just an event. It had become a convergence point of schemes, revenge, ambition, and the hope of redemption. The question was no longer who would attend, but who would leave unscathed. And before the plane took off, observers like Chelsea, Phyllis, and Sharon would have to decide. Would they remain spectators or step into the game?